Well, thanks everyone for coming today. I appreciate it. This is probably our biggest turnout yet, to my knowledge. My name is Zig, or Michael Zsiga. Nickname is Zig. And today we're going to go over really my point of view of the design mindset and overall evolution on how we really think about design. We have some housekeeping items to deal with first. So I'm going to go over some introduction of myself, a little bit of Wayfair. Then we're going to go into historical design mindset. We're going to go back in time, figure out what happened 15, 20 years ago in terms of design. And then after that, we're going to hit the overall evolution that I'm talking about with design mindset and a design framework. Then we're going to kind of follow that up after we do that with a high-level view of the CCDE, what it entails, and my experience with that certification. And then we'll wrap it all up into a nice, pretty present, right? So to start out, James kind of already did it, but a huge thanks to Wayfair for hosting us today. This is a great opportunity for us to all come together. From a BOSNOG perspective, the hardest part we have is finding places to really have everyone come together, get some food, get some drinks, and really meet people and collaborate on technology as a whole. So who am I? Again, my name is Zig. It's a nickname. My real name is Michael Zsiga, but if you just know me by Zig, that's good for me. I've been in the networking industry about 16 years now. I've been in kind of a lot of different positions over the years. I worked at a school district, my first job, went into the government world, the military, and then after the military went into a contract world for government in the Navy, and then DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and DoD. And then I eventually came back to the commercial world, and now I work at a partner level. My current position is a lead technical architect at E+, and by the show of hands in the room, who knows what E+ is? Not a lot of you guys, right? So I'm going to give a quick 30-second kind of summary of E+. E+ is a Cisco Juniper partner. We put together IT solutions for customers. We do it very consultatively. We want to figure out what your business is trying to do and come up with solutions that meet your business. Think of me, I'm one engineer, and if we'll go over my skill sets in a minute, but E+ has 300 of me worldwide. So we are a worldwide partner. We do have offices in Europe now, so we can kind of do all that kind of stuff at a high level view. My kind of technical experience here, so I spent 11 months last year going after the CCDE, and I finally passed it. It's one of the hardest exams I've ever taken, but the journey for me is what really mattered the most. And we'll go through that a little bit. From a technical perspective, I'm a dual CCIE. I have a route switch in ServerSpider, and then I also have CISSP. I am fortunate enough this year to be selected as a Cisco champion for 2017, and I'm really happy to be able to give back to the community, such as like doing stuff like this, blogging, and maybe some more things in the future. The last thing on here, and you see some of them on the front desk here, is I'm a co-author of one of the CCD in-depth books with Orhan Ergin out of Qatar. So this is really kind of a taking a boot camp, let's say, of material into a book to study for the Cisco Certified Design Expert exam. I will be handing out a few of them throughout the scenario, or throughout the presentation today. So if you answer some questions, you might get one. And then after we're done, if you want to, I can sign it if you want my signature, you know. Yeah, so maybe you don't want my signature, right? So, but with that, any questions on who I am, my experience, my expertise? All right, I'm gonna keep going. So we're going to start today with the historical design mindset, right? And really, what I mean by this is really, let's have a history lesson. Let's go back in time and figure out what happened like 15, 20 years ago. I might need some assistance from the people that have been in the industry a little longer than I have. My time frame was 16 years ago when I first started out. So if there's anyone in the room that's been there a little longer, might be able to shed some light on their experience as well. And again, I want this to be interactive. So, I know the majority of us are going to be introverts. And that's the general personality for network engineers and engineers as a whole. But I'm up here talking to everyone, right? And I'm probably the biggest introvert in the room. So if you guys could ask questions, discuss things, let's have an open discussion on these things, okay? So kind of setting the stage here, all right? And this is a rhetorical question for everyone. You know, answer it in your head. If you want to answer it out loud, go ahead. But I kind of built this quick little design last week. It's not pretty. But at a high level, is this a good design in your head, right? Think about it. Whatever you think is a good design, keep that in your head until later, all right? So in my experience, if we look back in time at the design mindset 15, 20 years ago, a lot of designs that I've seen or I've been a part of were more based on tactical decisions. The hardware that we had years ago just didn't support, from a memory or from a resource perspective, to do what we're doing today. So a lot of the designs had to be done because we needed to reduce the memory utilization or reduce the CPU load on the boxes that we had. So like example here, we would limit the number of routers in the OSPF area, right? And I think one of the going things, designs was limiting it to 50 routers to reduce the overall database size, and then that would reduce the overall memory and CPU utilization on those devices. We would also do overall link state design. So if you know, I'm sure most of you are familiar with OSPF area types, and the underlying reasoning behind them is to reduce the overall database size, right? So we have different LSAs that we're allowing or not allowing between different areas, and that overall reduces the database size, and we can now have what we couldn't have back then on routers that didn't have enough memory. Does anyone remember what the size of the memory was 15 years ago in the routers and switches that you had?
Yep.
What was it?
It's either 64 or 100.
Yeah, I mean, it was small, right?
No, forget it. It was like 16 meg.
16 meg. So could you imagine trying to run like BGP nowadays on a 16 meg memory for a router?
So the first router I worked for was 4 kilobytes.
So, you know, this is my take, okay? So like I said, let's have some back and forth on this. This was the tactical design decisions back then, right? We had to limit the resources loaded on these devices to make them functional in the environment. And the last thing I have as an example was prefix aggregation and summarization. We actually had to reduce what was in the routing table, and that was going to save memory and CPU utilization. The biggest point with this slide is that we actually had a reason for these designs, right? We were doing it for a reason. We had a why, and I want to make sure that that makes sense, right? Because the next slide that we're going to have is my take on this is the follow-on to a resource limitation. We had routers and switches that had enough resources, but we didn't have a design mindset. We didn't have a design. We kind of just did whatever we wanted to do. We were focused on different goals and outcomes, right? So I don't know if anyone else in here, but I worked at a company and I had my own CCIE lab, right? And that was production network. So I would, hey, I want to get my route switch CCIE, so I'm going to deploy this technology in production so I can learn it, right?
That guy.
Exactly. That was me. And I'm sure there's others in the room, right? That was me. So, you know, here I am in a production environment deploying stuff on the CCIE. There's no reason for me to deploy it in a production environment, but I was doing it. So that was, you know, doing the CCIE stuff. Also, deploying something because it's cool, right? I mean, now I think VXLAN and EVPN is probably the coolest thing out there, and I'm sure a lot of people are deploying it just because. Do you really have a reason to deploy it, right? A pretend design mindset. So this, my wording behind this is because the aspect after a general outcome and goals of what you're trying to do, the pretend design mindset is really a focus on, and I say this loosely, best practice, right? And this is me too, so keep this in mind. Anything I say here is probably me, I've done it. So if you go back 3 years ago and you ask me this question, what I would do from a design mindset, I would say, go get a CVD, go get a Cisco validated design document, and follow it to the T. And that's, in my mind now, is like a pretend mindset, right? Because you're not tying that to anything else. You are saying, hey, I'm going to follow this CVD, and that's how I'm going to implement it, but does it really need to happen on the customer side, right? And again, I come from a partner, so from my perspective, I deal with a lot of customers, and if it's not meeting their requirements, it's not a good design, right? And then the last thing, and I still see this today, and it really upsets me personally, a straight product migration. So we have customers, and in your environment, it might be your organization. You have whatever switch, whatever router, and then you just do a straight product migration to the next device that's out there, right? I've seen 3560s, 3760s on the Cisco side, and we just straight migrate to 3850. Or, we have a 6509, and we migrate it to 6807 or something like that. But we have no justification on what we're doing from a design perspective. We're just doing a straight migration. We're not having those discussions with the customers.
Cisco loves that.
If we were having consultative discussions, we'd be doing more than just that, though. And that's kind of my point, right? If we're actually saying, hey, what are you doing from a business perspective? Hey, you should actually do 2 cores versus 1 core. You don't want any downtime, so you really need to have 2 cores, right? Those discussions need to happen.
You're not a sales guy.
What's that?
You're not a sales guy.
I'm not a sales guy, technically. That's correct. But I care about the customers, right? And if I wasn't on the partner side and I was a customer, I care about my environment and making sure that it meets the business needs, right?
Well, you were talking about it. Yes, if it meets the business need. But how many times have you seen the place where you change something and anything that goes wrong after that, it's your fault?
Yep. I've seen it all the time,
Exactly.
personally.
So
right?
it's like, just migration is easy because we just upgraded and Cisco says that's the right path. You can blame people. So it's easy, but besides that, it's save your butt.
Yeah, I think having the discussion first before doing that is a better outcome than just doing it and then, a year from now being like, hey, why did we just do this? Like, our applications now aren't functioning because, or they're not as efficient as they could be. Without understanding what the underlying requirements are, it's extremely hard to say, hey, this is a good design. Any other questions? All right.
Limiting disruption to the environment could be a requirement.
Well,
Simplifying could be if you're doing it for a reason.
I would say I feel like lots of, especially higher ups who don't necessarily understand the technology underlying it, oftentimes put too much emphasis on let's make sure we don't break anything, where any change does have a potential of some risk. And I've been in an environment that, I'll just give you an example, where it's an internal network that doesn't have any business critical applications, where management demanded that if a person is on call, they respond to a phone text within 15 minutes. You tell me if that's reasonable or not. Salesforce does not have that SLA personally, and that's a little bit bigger company with a little bit bigger demands, right? So I'm just saying a lot of that, what I've seen is not the engineers not willing to do it. It's just they're put in such an environment where you literally don't want to risk making any change because anything happens and you're out.
So the real question is that risk valid? Does it have? Is that assessment of risk valid?
On the other side of the
And it's
coin,
not a
when
technical risk.
the manager assumes that you want X, Y, and Z, and your budget is A, B, and C, and he wants the best network possible, and why is there downtime? And you're never going to answer that question.
I think in that situation too is that the business doesn't take your opinion, right?
Yep.
And that's an issue that I see a lot in companies, right? So you have to earn that, and I think that takes time, and it takes a little risk on the business side. And I've done it in the past. So
Not every business is right for it on day one. Sometimes they had to find, the manager themselves has to see how bad things can get.
exactly, right? And you have to have those situations that happen, how bad it can get, and that might be a catalyst for you to do things the right way. And again, the right way may not be what we have in our mind. The right way might be at least understanding what the business is trying to do, and then designing per those requirements. So as I go through the scenario, the scenario, I keep saying scenarios. As I go through the presentation, you're going to see the CCDE photo book icon. And from my perspective, that means that you guys get a chance to answer a question, and whoever answers it will get a book. Okay? The first person answers. Trying to make this a little fun, right? So, what's that?
Answering the book?
No. It's not this one. This is
Hold on.
all right.
I can get
But that is a good one, right? So, can anyone tell me if you could raise? I guess anyone could say this, right? What was the first networks? Do you?
Green.
What's that?
Dark and green.
No.
Could have been the first one. Come on.
Do you? I mean, it might be subjective. I don't know. I just know. What's that?
It was the dark one.
I had ARPANET, and then that later became MILNET, and then academic and research communities used PEN, CSNet, which later became NSF. I do not know what those stand for, though. There you go. If you want it, if you don't want it, then I can keep it.
He's a Juniper guy, he doesn't want it.
It's a vendor neutral exam, right?
Actually,
It says C on it, it's not vendor neutral, sorry.
Well, so to be honest, I was a CCIE way back when.
And then you learn the error of your ways.
But we'll get into it, but it's a very different exam than like a CCIE exam. All right. But yeah, so those were the first networks, and you know, I actually had to do research to figure that out because I couldn't remember, right? I knew ARPANET, but I didn't know the academic and research communities. Can anyone, and you don't get a book for this one, but what was the network engineer's role? Or the network's role, sorry.
Survive a nuclear war.
Actually, that was correct.
Really?
Yeah, that's correct.
So, well, that's what I've heard. I don't know if that's actually true, but like,
So
there was some attack.
they wanted to
somewhere else.
interconnect the different computer centers
Okay.
around the country, and the main reason was, you know, in case of a nuclear attack.
Interesting. So,
And by the way, there is a still requirement from way back then that all the routers that you're installing in the military facilities, they have to have a modem dial-up V9. You know, today's a V90. You have to have that inside.
how long have you been in the network industry?
Too long.
Cool. 30 years?
The first router I worked on had 4 kilobytes of memory.
Yeah, exactly, right? Well, I asked. So, I mean, you know, when I did this, I kind of came up with a simple medium for connecting routers or computers, right? That was my kind of viewpoint. And again, I can only go back 16 years, right? Where my first network was at a school district, and we didn't have a network. We had 100 systems, 100 computers, and they weren't connected at all. So, what's that?
You had sneaker net.
Exactly, right? And I had to run around and you know, have a 3.5-inch floppy disk and install things, right? That's how I started. And I'm sure a lot of you were in that phase as well throughout your careers. So the other thing is, what was the computer's original role? And I kind of put computational. I don't know if that's 100% accurate. That's my viewpoint, right? Initial use of the computer was to do statistical analysis and math and computational functions, right?
It's in Hidden Figures.
What's that?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's in Hidden Figures,
There
right?
are computers running around.
Is that a good movie?
It's good.
All right.
Really good. Yeah.
It's not from a woman. No.
No, oh.
It's a
No, it's really
good
good.
movie.
All right. So what was, and sorry guys. What was the network engineer's role 15 years ago? I have that in here too, actually.
Twin cables.
So remember, this was the FIDI. This was the era of FIDI, Token Ring, and then Novell, right?
No, 15, no.
No?
No. Token Ring was then,
Okay.
15 years ago.
Let's say 15 to 20.
I mean, the internet was already been there.
So 25?
25.
25?
I worked in a place in 1996.
996.
Wow.
Well, 20 years.
All right. So my comment on the era is wrong, obviously. But the point here is, well, did we have a role? We did? Or was it
Did you ever
more?
try to configure ATM?
I have.
Did you try to configure ATM?
Yeah, I get
And
like
then,
50
you
bucks
know,
all the time.
getting the PVCs and SVCs and then there was something which was even before that was
All right.
called SNA. And then when you had to do the PU and LU. So you had a lot of work there.
On the service provider front, right? Or was that enterprise? That was enterprise. You still had to do it on the enterprise
It's an
side.
enterprise, you know, you had a lot of work
You
there.
installed hubs everywhere.
That's
That was it.
that's so.
No, there were mouths. There were
My thought process, and again, I don't know how accurate this is, right? My thought process was that we didn't really have a role. We were still sysadmins, right? At a high level. But to your point, your experience goes a lot further back than mine. I mean, like I said, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I was at a school district working, and there was no network. I was just installing.
I think you're basically saying that you're an IT guy who manages systems, and by the way, you have to do the network stuff just because you need it. It wasn't a dedicated.
It wasn't
I
a
just do
dedicated position.
network, right, and not do something else, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's kind of what I was trying to say in my own world, in my own mind, right? So we had sysadmins or IT, right, as a bubble, and we had added responsibilities in that bubble that became the network. Is what I was trying to get at, but we didn't have a specific network role. Do you think that's accurate? But to your point, I don't think that's accurate. Right? You're saying no.
So IBM was the largest reseller of
enterprise.
Cisco.
For enterprise. I mean, I think our traditional things back then was maybe POTS lines. You have telecom, right? And that was back then. ISDN, POTS lines, telecom. I mean, but
I had a place with a VAX and a ton of dumb terminals.
Yeah, but 15 years ago, you were already 2002.
Yeah.
In 2002, you already had, Ethernet was better.
it was already there,
coming
right?
out.
MPLS networks were already there.
Yeah, and it was all IP. So the frame relay was dying down.
Make it 25.
Yeah, honestly, it was a variable, right? So think of this as a variable. I put 15 years ago, just a random number, okay? So think just in general, back in time. And for you, it might be different, because like if you've been in the industry for 30 years, or however long, right? I don't know. No offense, sorry. However long, right? If it's 25 years or 20 years, your experience is very different.
You can tell he's been to me.
All right, I think I've...
You look really good.
We're gonna have a millennial versus baby.
Yes, everyone that was 30 years or more, get over here. Everyone that was in the last 15, 20 years, get over there. We're gonna fight.
No.
You know what token ring is? Yeah, this side.
Yes. All right, so I think that's enough of the history lesson, right? Everyone, we realize I don't know anything about the history lesson of networks, right? And this gentleman, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, he knows everything about it.
No, I don't. Actually, you should meet a friend of mine, Dave Oran. We started in the networking industry in 1975.
That's like the same year as Microsoft.
That was his.
Were there any networks then?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Actually, you'll be surprised. He wrote a mobile banking application. That was his first job in 1975.
Wow. So that's
And
kind
that bank
of
was in
insane.
Mexico. They had dial-up connections between Mexico banks, and he wrote up the application and this is how they were doing the money transfers between
That's insane.
the banks.
They have a law back then?
All right. Well, let's move on, right? We got to keep an eye on time, right? Before we go down this rabbit hole any further. So that was enough of a history lesson. We're going to move on to what I would call an evolution of a design mindset. So I have some important questions. I'm going to read them, and then as I go through, we'll answer them, right? So what's the network role today? What is best practice? And that's coded because it's important. What makes a good design? What is a design mindset? And then what's the engineer's role today? All right, so I'm going to start with an analogy, in my opinion, and I try to come up with one, so if it sucks, I'm sorry, but I really did try to come up with one. So we have a house, and we have infrastructure for the house, right? We have plumbing, we have electricity, we have gas, right? And we might have more, I don't know. That's what I have in my house. So those kind of services will do things in the house. So the way you combine those services will make heat, right? Depending on what you have, if you have oil or gas or electric. They'll make hot water, and you can kind of throw in whatever service that you make with those infrastructure resources into your own house. To tie this into a business, let's say the house is the business, okay? Let's say plumbing is the network, electricity is the servers, and gas is the security. And then the product of like heat and water, hot water, heat, that is actually the applications themselves. Does that kind of make sense? I know it kind of was out there. Maybe someone has a better analogy that I'm trying to make? Crickets. All right, well,
We'll go with it.
so I'm going to work with it, and if we think about it throughout this process, I'm trying to find an analogy to really mean that IT is becoming the infrastructure of businesses. It's the underlying, not just infrastructure, but the underlying piping and plumbing of a business.
Could you
Okay.
say pipes would be their cables?
That would work, right? See?
It's not even.
Hey, I'm an engineer and I over-engineer things, right? So,
So, do those things make the house money?
That's a good point.
You have solar panels.
Solar panels make the house money.
If it's a business, nobody's gonna come to your business.
So I lost the whole money tying thing, right?
Keep the beer.
Sorry about that.
Well, no, I think
Like
it's
the way
not
you
money, it's by providing value. That the house provides value by being there, and using those applications and servers, and in turn, can make money.
So I guess the question is, what's the overall goal of a house, right? And then what's the overall goal for a business?
That's somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And if the house wasn't heated, then you wouldn't want to live there. Well, in wintertime anyway.
To fulfill requirements.
What's that?
To fulfill requirements.
Yeah, right. That's the underlying thing, right? We have specific requirements for each analogy, right? We have a house, and there's specific things a house is supposed to do. For a business, it's going to do a specific things, and that's really what I was trying to go at with that. I hope that makes sense. I couldn't find a better analogy. So, we have a book on the screen. So, I just gave the answer away.
Business enabler.
There we go. Does not count.
Business enablement.
So what role does the network have today? There's another one. So
It enables business.
it enables.
Alex, what is the enablement of business?
Nice. Good job, guys. Good job. All right. So you get that one, right? Everyone saw that because I failed miserably. But there's another one, right? So let's go a step further, and I'll just say it, and then no one will get the book, right? So
By the way, I've been selling the book.
hey, I hear they're going like $70 on eBay.
Ooh.
By yourself.
Off topic. What's that?
That's on your site. On
No,
right?
no. I mean, I'm a co-author, but I don't actually sell them.
You make a whopping like 65% of that, right?
Yeah, I wish. All right, so the next kind of thing I was trying to say here was that we have a business enabler, right? So the network is becoming a way for the business to be more efficient at making money. It may not be directly tied to making money with business enabler. It might be something that allows the business to make more money quicker, or it might be make more money more efficiently, right? And I tried to come up with an example for this one in my head, and I was trying to think like, if you go back when we had POTS lines, and we had to use phones to call each other on POTS lines, and that's how communication ran, and there was a phase where the network started having email and chat, and those became business enablers, but they weren't exactly required yet. You still had POTS lines. So if the network was down, well, your efficiency was hit, right? So you may not be able to make money as quickly, but you still had POTS lines to call people. So that's my analogy for that, okay? The next one that I was going to say is, it is the business, all right? So examples of this would be if anyone's in a service provider world or a cellular world, your network is the business. Are there any other examples in that out there? AWS, right? And it was out the other day. It was down, and it affected everyone, right?
Yes.
It affected Slack. It affected,
It affected-
ShareFile. I mean, it affected everything.
It affected anybody who didn't replicate their S3 buckets. That's the only people it affected.
That's a lot,
Yeah,
right?
but
So
it-
someone
yeah.
didn't follow
But there's
AWS's
a
requirement or
mistake.
guidelines, and that's why they were affected, right?
US East 1 always seems to be the one that has the problem.
Yeah.
Sounds like you should be architect and buy more.
Buy more resources and spend more money. So, again, bringing this back, all right? So,
Actually, you should know why it went down. We just still can't figure out whose mistake was it. Was it the company in the Tasman Drive, or was it the company of the North Matilda Avenue? So that's the question. Because a big route reflector failed, and we still cannot figure out which vendor was it. It was one
Oh,
of
really?
these two.
So I didn't look into it yet. I have on my to-do list.
I think it was one of the.
A large route reflector is just like.
Was aspiring to be a CCIA, and then he was.
He did some route map, and it just broke everything. And then no one knew, right?
Cisco Live and you went.
Yeah, I just did it, yeah. I didn't break anything, okay? It wasn't me.
Run VXLAN on the route reflector.
So trying to get back here to the presentation, where I want to make sure we're on time, and so the people don't, stay way too late today and hate life. So the point here is that it's the business, right? So there's some requirements there. If it's the business, there's some design elements that you have to have, and that's really what I'm trying to get back to, right? So now we're going to go on to best practice, right? I think that was the third question. So what is best practice? If you asked me 3 years ago, and I think I might have mentioned this, I thought best practice was the Bible. And maybe that's wrong,
No, you're right.
wrong perspective. I mean, it goes religion, but it was just an example. Or the blueprint, or I have no choice, I gotta do best practice, all right? And the next step to that, next kind of follow on to that is biased, right? So I personally know that I'm biased to EIGRP. I know that I'm biased to a routed access design, right? And I would rather do a routed access design with equal cost multipathing versus running spanning tree.
Oh, spanning tree's so good though.
I know, right? It's amazing, right? So I'm biased to that. And if you went back and saw some of the things I built 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I guarantee you they had EIGRP and they had a routed access design. And it didn't tie to a business need. It's just because this is how we're doing it. We're gonna follow my personal best practice. We're gonna follow this CVD, and that's what we're doing.
That's the best.
Yeah, right?
Sure.
There's really no real understanding of the business requirements here, right? And that's kind of where I'm getting at is when you go through best practice, and in my opinion, and historically, a lot of people just do best practice and they just don't understand what they're doing. They might be doing, and I have an example I think later on, right? I'll go through it. So best practice, I have a quote, all right? And I think Rob's gonna like this quote, right? So I don't know if anyone else in here is a VCDX. Rob Kloss over there, he works at E+. He is. So VCDX is the VMware design certification, kind of like the CCDE for Cisco. And this is a good quote. I like it. We've talked about it internally at E+ a few times. I'm going to read it verbatim. It's like the only slide I'm going to try to read verbatim once.
I have a few customers I would love to send that slide to.
Yeah, I mean, you guys we'll get all this to you guys. So if you want to send it, by all means. So best practice, right? Use of best practices may apply for majority of implementations, but these are not customer specific or applicable in all situations. A qualified design expert knows when to deviate from best practice while providing a justifiable and supportable solution. Best practices are a baseline from which we work in the absence of specific requirements that would justify deviation. Knowing why it is a best practice is important so that you know where to create a new best practice specific to your design and customer. It's a lot of wording. It really makes sense. I hope it hits home with you guys. And I kind of my own take on it. And this is still, sorry, my thing's popping up.
You can ask, why did you do that? Because of best practice. And we answer that, you failed VCDX.
See? But again, if you go back, and I don't know if there's, I mean, I'm talking a lot, right? And I'm putting myself out there tonight. I'm telling you, like, I was not a good designer 3 years ago, period. So if you guys in your head, and don't raise your hands if you don't want to, right? If you designed something 3 years ago or today, and you said I did it because of best practice, and you had nothing to base that on, I mean, did anyone do that? Does anyone do that today, right? Again, don't raise your hands. Just think about that, right? If you're designing something and you're saying it's best practice, but you're not tying back to something, that's not a good design, is what I'm trying to get at, right? So a design should tie back to business requirements, and that's really the underlying thought process here. You should have business requirements, and a design really should meet those business requirements. Examples. So this is a simple example, I hope. Why do we enable an OSPF interface as a point-to-point interface? Traditional. Anyone want to know? Anyone want to answer? It comes up faster, right?
You only got 2 letters.
Right? So you have a /30 connection, and why are you going to do broadcast? Or /31 in some cases, right? Why are you going to do a broadcast type interface versus the point-to-point interface?
Then you got to deal with BDRs and all that other crap.
DR election, BDR election,
DRs, BDRs.
timers, right? So my question to you is this best practice? Maybe a better question would be, does this break a business requirement that a customer is trying to do? And this is simple, and it may not break a business requirement, right? But if we go a step further and we ask a more kind of complicated technical question, what about implementing sub-second failover versus like less than 5-second failover? Is your best practice to implement sub-second failover? And if it is, why? I'm going to keep asking why all night.
You have to compare the cost of that versus what you get it. Right?
I would, but you also have to not just compare the cost, in my opinion, but you have to push that back to a design requirement, a business requirement, right? So if a business says, I have latency critical applications and I need things to converge very quickly, and when you start asking some more important questions, how fast do you need things to reconverge, 5 seconds might be fine.
5 seconds might be fine,
Yep.
but if it's all the same cost, you might as well go for sub-second, because I doubt you will find saying, okay, 5 seconds is my requirement. Nobody's going to complain if it's sub-second. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, that converged too fast, I don't know.
But to that
I need
point,
to look
my
at
comment,
doing something, slow that down.
but my comment on that would be, are you adding complexity? And it's not
So-
needed,
so you
right?
have to compare the
You
cost.
have to be careful not to over-design.
Exactly. So like in that instance, would you be running BFD?
Multi-vendor between this, I mean, if you start multi-vendors, that adds a lot of extra questions.
Right. So, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to compare the cost. Is it different kind of equipment? You know, better routers because so they can do this faster, or is it you tie into a specific vendor or whatever it is, right? Yeah. But like if you just look at from a business requirement point of view, just from the benefit point of view, 5 seconds versus sub-second, not considering the cost
Anything
of it.
else?
Right. Then it's
But you have to also have this use case.
Yeah.
What is your use case for the for the failover? What is the latency that you can tolerate between the failovers?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. But if you do it better than what you can tolerate, that's fine. Assuming you're still meeting all the other requirements.
Because
You're
some of
slowing
the
down the
failovers
cost.
can be like 5 minutes, and you will be within the business use case.
Right.
The other aspect of time is how long does it take you to do this with multi-vendor support? Now, if you happen to be a green field, that simplifies things.
So-
One throat to choke, but sorry, moving on.
No, it's fine. I mean, I was going to follow up
I
to
think
that,
we're
but
on the same page.
you guys are on the same page, right? And I think your terminology is a little different than mine, but I think in the real thing here, the goal here is you have to understand the full picture, right? And you can't understand the full picture without business requirements. And I'm going to keep harping that the whole time, and then we'll get into business requirements, okay? But you need to understand the full picture before making a decision. And historically, I would say the majority of engineers, and maybe not a lot of you in here, the majority of engineers I know will just say, best practice, I'm doing it, I don't know why. If you can't answer why, then you're not doing it right. Okay? All right, so we had this diagram back at the beginning, and we're going kind of slow through this, so I apologize. So before I asked you if this is a good design, now I'm asking you what makes a good design. Depends. That's the best answer right there. That is the best answer, right? So how can we grade this design if we don't know the grading sheet or the blueprint or the requirements? All those kind of tying together, synonyms, right? So we can't grade this, right? We don't know if it's a good design or not. I would be biased and say it's not a good design, right? I would use my experience and say this is a bad design. But is that the right way of doing it? We're not tying it to business requirements. So, a definition of a design mindset, and this is my definition, so we might tweak it over time. By all means, I ask your opinions, right? My definition is a contextual framework focused on the overall solution by analyzing and comparing a determined list of requirements. Some things to talk about here. I did this without IT in it, okay? There's a reason behind that, and I'll explain it near the end. But I did it without IT, without saying network, without saying IT. I want it to be more abstract than specifically to IT. Does everyone understand this kind of?
So you can apply it to different things.
Yes, that's the game plan. Yep.
It also resonates more with people that are not IT that
Yes.
you're probably talking to.
Yes. We want to bring context, right, to the business, and this is hopefully a way that we can bring context to the business, and they can see the value of network engineers. So about the design, right? So this is not a problem-solving framework. This is more of a solution-focused framework. We're designing solutions and not fixing underlying tactical problems. And an analogy here would be, I think I was talking to, I forget your name over there, Bruce. I was talking to him earlier. So think of it like our day-to-day job, in most cases, in my opinion, is we are triage doctors in an ER. We're dealing with things that come in as they come in, and we don't have a say when they come in. We got to fix it. We got to make it work. So we have applications. We got VMware guys. Sorry, Rob. we got all these other applications and developers coming in, and we have to just do it. And then we might have a chance to write down, hey, we need to redesign this 6 months from now. We're never going to get to it. There's 5 to 15 other things coming in. And now we got to redesign those, or we got to implement them tactically, not strategically. But this framework is a solution-focused framework. It's a solution-focused thought process versus a problem-solving thought process. This framework's gonna give you the structure to validate a design, to make sure a design is acceptable, right? You're gonna have requirements that come into a design, and you're gonna be able to say, hey, this meets those requirements. It's a good design. This focus is on the understanding of the overall requirements. That is the underlying focus of this framework. And it doesn't say business requirements, because again, I'm trying to keep it abstract, and I want it to mean whatever the requirements are, right? In different venues, the requirements can be very different than business requirements. Okay. So how do we determine requirements? And we're going to bring it back to like business specifically right now. So we have explicit and we have implicit. Explicit, I would say, are the easiest, right? If anyone's taken the CCI exams, you get explicit tasks, and they're pretty easy to do because it says, hey, do this, right? For a customer, when you're talking to a customer about a network, they're going to say, hey, my custom application is the most important thing in the network, you know? And it may be, you have to validate that yourselves, and it may not be, you have to validate that, right? Or they might come out and say that, hey, we're running voice and video, and those are the most important networks for our call center. We're doing, you know, wireless video and voice, or we're doing wired video and voice. And now we have to make sure that we're accounting those items into our technical requirements, right? So those are explicit, and that's just some examples. Now we have implicit, and this is the harder one, right? We have to determine what these are. We have to elicit this information from the customers. And in your environments, if you're not like a partner like I am, it would be you have to get this information from your organizations, from your developers, from your business leaders, right? It means you have to actually go and talk to them, right? And we're all introverts, I'm sure. So we have to get out of our shells. Maybe not all of us, but we have to get out of our shells and have these discussions. And want a seat at the table, right? Because right now we don't get a seat at the table in most companies. We're finding out after the fact. But we want to get a seat at the table so we can have these discussions and hopefully design things appropriately. You're going to need experience to do this, to the implicit ones, right? This is going to take time. This doesn't come natural to most people. It might come natural to a lot of people, but in my experience, it just doesn't come natural. And then here's some just high-level, I picked a few questions that relate to the different requirements, right? And you guys can read these, and I'll read a couple, but so the business requirements, what are the key drivers for IT in your business? So again, as a whole, IT, I'm not saying network, but how does IT function in your network, in your business? Is it a business enabler? Is it the business? Or is it something else? And these are important questions to ask, and then you get the information back, and you can design a solution that meets these requirements. Application requirements, what are your critical applications in your environment, in your business, right? And the technical requirements are probably the easiest for the majority of people in the room. You know, what are you running for routing protocols? Why, right? What vendor hardware you're using? I think we talked, you know, if you have a mixed vendor environment, you can't run an IGRP, right? Or you could, and you could redistribute. But there's design impacts to all that. But these are usually easier because we're already thinking about these. Because we're in our little silo, and we're going to think about this stuff. And I'm kind of asking that we need to get out of our silos and ask these other questions. There's a longer list of questions on the Unleashing CCDE blog, on Cisco's official blog post. That is a link, and you guys will get, I think, these slides when this is all done. But I can also tell you what all the information is. There's a ton of information out there. Anyone have any questions right now? No? All right, cool. So back to this, right? Back to this, what makes a good design? And I have a book here again, right? So if anyone really wants a book, right? So business requirements. So we're going to give some business requirements, and I picked these randomly and on the fly, all right? So these are generic at a high level, right? So the business requirements is this business is going to have high growth over the next 10 years, all right? The next business requirement is the network. If the network is down, we don't have a business. Right? So can you guys think of in your head what that means to a business like that? The network's down, we don't have a business, and we're going to have high growth over the next 10 years. All right? And let's give it a number. Let's say 10 times the growth in 10 years. Right?
The situation is similar to what we finished.
Yeah? So All right, maybe this is gonna hit home, right? So this is the question part, right? If someone can tell me what would be the high growth over the next 10 years is the business requirement, what would be the design requirement from that business requirement?
Well, those guys only talk to each other. They cannot talk to anyone outside of the world.
Well, okay. I don't have a cloud, right? I don't have an internet, but let's assume that there is a cloud and there is an internet. There's another room.
Very scalable here.
There you go.
Scalable and high HA.
The scalability.
You need high availability because of the, can't go
What's the
down.
definition of growth?
The question is, what is the application? Like,
We don't know the application. We don't know the application right now. It was just a quick. Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like all those things, you can increase them to a quite a significant degree. The real question is, what is the application? If the application, let's say, has a small constraint that blocks, plots, code, or whatever that you can keep replicating, this may just work. If it has to live in all the 3 places at the same time, it may not grow 10 times.
What's the definition of growth?
Yeah. So growth.
Is it multiple sites? Is it addition of additional campuses? Is it scale within the campuses? Is that
So growth, and the way I worded it was growth was what we have today. We have these campuses, and we're going to outgrow them, right? And we grow them to a magnitude of 10 times over the next 10 years. Let's assume, based on that, and maybe I took a leap and assumed that we're going to have 10 more campuses, right? And right now, if you look at the design, and again, this isn't a good design in my opinion, but we have every campus is directly connected to every campus. It's not going to scale. Right?
Architecture with 3 sites, and you're planning to scale 10 sites.
If you do 4 sites, it might work. If you do 5 sites, what happens? If you do 6 sites, what happens, right? So there's an aspect of scalability, modularity, right?
So here's a question for you. Especially large enterprise, large service providers, they're looking to run IBGP and they want to run full mesh. So you're getting into a 400 nodes in the full mesh.
Route reflectors.
Yes.
No, they don't want to do route reflectors.
Well, then
Do EBGP and do routes.
No, IBGP.
Yeah. So I would.
Yeah,
we would have to have a big design discussion,
right?
and really be fully, honestly, tactful, I guess, or blunt, and really have that discussion, and go back to business requirements first. Like, I don't care what you're doing today. Let's discuss your business requirements. All right. Let's list them all out, and I'll ask you a ton of questions, and I'm going to elicit everything I can, and then we can come from there and make hopefully a good design based on that.
These sites are Cambridge, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. You're planning to add
No, well, the question is why is it IBGP? Like,
Texas.
Does it have to be IBGP? Like, what are you trying
Those
to
are
say?
all geographically dispersed, latency between sites. Those are all business, not technical, right?
Yeah.
And they have to do
Each one.
They're again, we have to start at the business requirements, right? There's going to be technical requirements too, right? But a lot of times we start with the technical requirements before we don't even discuss business requirements, okay? And that's what I'm trying to say is we need to have that discussion before we even discuss or even think about technical requirements, right? How are we going to interconnect these, right? So modularity, scalability, and flexibility. That's what I get from that statement. Now, I'm biased. I wrote the statement, right? So just keep that in your mind. Like this, it was a quick example, a quick question. You could go a lot further than that. Like if you're talking about applications, we weren't talking about an application. It was supposed to be just a really quick subset, right?
But here's the thing, network is designed to transfer data
Yes.
or something.
Yep.
It's like if you make a fundament of a building, you need to know what the building is.
And you're right.
Fundament for a igloo is slightly different than fundament for a skyscraper.
Yep.
In fact, there's no fundament for it. But here's the thing. Unless we know what runs it, I mean, the business requirements are one thing, and I absolutely agree with you. But those business requirements are, okay, we have to serve, we have to make sure our website is up. That's so great, it's an important business requirement. But without knowing what is the back end, what is the application that serves the website, you can't make any of those decisions.
So my comment to that though would be your application requirements are actually going to tie into your business requirements. So your business is going to want to make money in the usual fashion, right? In whatever they're doing. So traditionally, when they have applications, those are going to tie directly into those business requirements, and they're going to be not one and the same, but they're going to complement each other, right? So if you have a, like in this example, let's say we have, there's no SaaS applications, there's no web applications. Let's say it's, I don't know, I mean, the diagram isn't gonna help us, but let's say it's a service provider. And, you know, each one of these is a different POP, not a campus, a different POP. And we're gonna grow that POP, that environment to 10 more POPs over the next 10 years, geographically dispersed. You know, those services are a little different, right? Those applications, there's really no applications from an application perspective. It's a service. We're offering maybe L3 VPN, L2 VPN, VPLS. Those are the services we're offering. So in that context, this isn't scalable, right?
Yeah, actually, with the service provider, you will get the direct opposite because service provider have a lot of enterprises. Each one of the enterprises would like to have their own policies pushed out. And if you talk to any larger, carrier, they will have some multiple connections to different service, like application services. They will have direct connections to Salesforce, and they will say, I want to have this policy, this BGP policy to Salesforce, and this BGP policy to to WebEx, as an example. And then how will you overcome that? You know, and they will have some crazy topology because they will be out of 19,000 locations, they will have 13,000 where they want to be.
So in that example, you're actually offering a service through the service provider. That's an application, right? You're peering.
I am the service provider.
You're the service provider?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I mean, I think this was supposed to be like an easy thing, right? It turned into a really discussion, right? And everyone has their own opinions, which I think is great, right? But like what we have here, and if we take it, and I think James mentioned, reduce single points of failure, isolate failure domains. And those were kind of, we don't want the network to go down, right? We don't want that to happen. And the follow-on thing was a different kind of diagram, right? Where instead of having a full mesh of sites, we have a core block, and all the sites connect to the core block, right? And so theoretically, when you add a new core or a new campus or POP or pod, it doesn't affect all the other pods, right? It's fault domain and fault. It's isolated from fault domain and fault isolation standpoint, and it just goes to the core. And it's a little different of a design, right? And again, there's a lot of information that's missing.
But that's also going to depend on the distance between your sites, though. If
yes.
You're small graph and your sites are located
yes.
100 kilometers away.
We're missing a lot of information. Yeah. Totally,
that's
right?
Topology.
But if it was locally, geographically the same location, right? But again, we're missing a lot of information. This was supposed to be just a simple thing, right? and we're over analyzing. That makes sense, okay?
I guess my question, how about budgeting? Usually you're just limited by how much money you're allocated.
Is that like
but budget is another issue too. It's another. It could be a business requirement for budget. Okay.
Yeah, I joke. It's like money is layered.
So, you have a question?
Well, a lot of this discussion seems to be still down in the weeds, you know?
Exactly.
Because if I'm talking to a VP or something, he's not going to say, oh, well, flexibility and scalability. What he's going to say is, if these sites don't work, I don't sell soda.
Yes.
That's it.
The VP says, I need to lower my
I don't sell this, I don't sell that. And then that's when you get down to and say, well, I need to focus on this, these sites, or this distance, or that distance. But before you even get there, you have to say, your business work. If I'm not selling, I don't have a business.
Yeah, it's like your Fidelity. You don't trade on the stock market for 1 minute, you lose $5 million.
Tons of money, right?
People saying 1 million, 2 million, 3 million,
yeah,
4
I'm just
million.
saying like that. Like, you could justify anything with that kind of loss. You could say $5 million.
But, and what you said there is really what I'm going with, right? I mean, our discussion was good, right? But it was too low, and we're at a higher level when we're talking about these design things and business requirements, and even application requirements too. We're at a different level, right? We're not implementing right now. This is at a different level in the whole process. My last comment on this page or this slide is theoretically, when we have business requirements and we can tie them to design requirements, it makes it easier to grade the design, right? Because now we can say, hey, does this meet those business requirements? And if we had application requirements, does it meet application requirements? And if it does meet the business requirements and the application requirements, we have a good design. Does everyone kind of agree with that? High level, again, not low level implementation, high level. Does it make sense? All right, you're shaking your head or you're nodding your head and all right, you got to smile. All right, cool. So moving on. right. Oop. I think that's. So in this framework that I'm talking about, what's the engineer's role? Right? And I'm going to go through these as quickly as I can because we're kind of coming up on time. We as engineers need to understand the business, right? And I say that and I mean that because we can't be our introverted selves and be siloed and be isolated in our little cubicles or isolated in a closet, dark closet with our monitors and our keyboards. We really need to talk to the company, right? From my position at a VAR, I need to talk to the customers and say, hey, let's talk to your VPs. Let's talk to your business leaders. Let's discuss what's important. And let's come back with a good design, right? And again, that's following the framework, a good design. Meeting all their business requirements, application requirements, and then technical requirements. We need to build solutions and designs that meet the business requirements above all else, right? And not build our CCIE labs, not build a biased network, right? You get it, right? I mean, those are cool, and I've done it. I don't recommend it. We need to have a consultative approach when we're talking to customers. And in your environment, since maybe you're not a VAR, talking to your organizations, your development team, your engineering team, you need to be a part of their environment and partner with them and not kind of get that information after the fact, right? And then finally, once we do all that, we should get a seat at the table, right? We should be either maybe not us, the engineers at our level, but you know, your CTO, your CIO, whoever is your VP of engineering or VP of IT, they need to have a seat at the table and be able to know that, hey, these are important things that we need to discuss. Does that make sense? Any disagreement on that? No? All right. So I'm going to take this step a little further, and I mentioned this earlier, right? This framework, let's decouple it from networking, okay? And let's try and use that framework on servers or virtual environments or cloud even, right? Now cloud's a big deal, automation. Can you use this framework there, I ask? And you can answer if you want, it's rhetorical, right? Just think about that for a minute. And then how about outside of IT as a whole, right? Could you use this framework to design a car, right? You get requirements. They're not business requirements per se. You get requirements, whatever those requirements are, right? You could list them off as, you know, maybe not business, but functional requirements maybe. And then you could tie them into design requirements. And now you have a design. And then you could, hey, does that meet your overall requirements, right? Does that make sense? See some people shaking their head yes or nodding their heads.
Why not? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So now my next question is, what do we think the network's role is going to be in the future? We kind of know what it is today. It's a business enabler. It is the business, right? But what do we think it's going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? You know, and hopefully you guys can think about that on your own. You can ask questions. You can answer. You know, I'll give you my opinion. I think it's going to be the foundation of everything we do. I mean, you can see how it's evolved over the years, but it's already starting to be the foundation of everything, right? I mean, you got IoT, right? And that's a ton of stuff.
Well, there's the whole
cloud, right? SDN. I mean, SDN's a loaded thing, but I mean, we could talk for hours on SDN alone. Does that all make sense, guys? But you can think about these things afterwards, right? So like I said, it's not just a business enabler anymore. It's really the foundation of businesses. And it's not going to just be the foundation of businesses in the future, I don't think. It'll be the foundation of everything. All right, so moving on. Anyone have any questions on mindset, historical version that we went into pretty lengthily, and then the evolution of the mindset? Questions, comments, concerns? No? So the Cisco Certified Design Expert. Hopefully everyone kind of has a high-level view of what the CCDE is, right? The CCDE is a vendor-agnostic certification. Even though it's held by Cisco and it's managed by Cisco, it is a vendor-neutral certification. There are technologies on it that aren't open, right? DMVPN and EIGRP are on the blueprint, but for the most part, it's vendor-neutral. There's really nothing else that compares to EIGRP.
Well, yeah, but I'm sure it doesn't have like a Juniper proprietary things on that either, right? So you kind of have Cisco proprietary.
But you know, they'll have anything that can be like an RFC, right? And but it includes EIGRP and possibly
they opened
and that might change. Anyways, right? They did. But that might change. I don't know. I mean, to talk to Elaine, it might change. But that's the last info I had. That's what it was. So you have to have a full understanding of routing and switching technologies and service provider technologies. That doesn't mean you have to know how to implement them, right? It'll help probably. It might not help as well, like in my case. But you have to know these technologies, and then to follow on to that, you have to be able to compare them and contrast them in certain situations, all right? And then you have to match these technologies to business requirements, right? So if you have an environment that has fan relay or maybe ATM, and you need to migrate from that, what would be a good technology to migrate that to, right? Would it be MPLS L2 VPN? Would it be MPLS L3 VPN? Would it be VPLS? Just knowing those things and kind of those differences, and then being able to tie the business requirements into them. So at a high level, the CCDE and the CCIE, you can see the little diagram chart thing. CCIE and CCDE are at the strategic side, right, high up. CCNA and CCDA are at the tactical side on the bottom. And then we have the arrows going left to right. We have the implementation side for the CCIE and CCNP and CCNA. And then we have the design, right? So CCIE, and I'm sure everyone kind of knows this, is focused on the CLI and implementation tasks. The CCDE is focused on translating requirements to technology. So the CCD kind of relates to that design mindset a little bit, right? Because we're taking business requirements and we're transitioning those business requirements into technical requirements in the design. Again, the CCIE is the how, CCD is the why. All right? Why are we doing something? So if you're going to go take the Cisco Certified Design Expert exam and you want to go through that process, the first step is taking the written exam or the qualification exam. I believe the number is still 352-001. You take it at a peer review site. It's 2 hours. There's a number of questions on it. You pass it. Now you can take the actual practical, right? The practical.
Just one note. So that CCDE written actually renews your CCIE. So if you wanted to do that.
Yeah. So if you want to renew your CCIE, you can take the CCDE and written or qualification exam, and it will renew your CCIE.
Anyone besides this guy take that? Here?
Yes.
You?
Anyone else?
Just
That's okay. So yeah, you can take it to renew your CCIE. I mean, I would advise taking any CCIE, any other track to renew your CCIE, just to kind of give you some other experience out there if you are renewing your CCIEs. I know some people would disagree with that, I'm sure, learning something new. But even any of the written exams now, you have to know all the evolving technology questions and whatnot too. After you pass the written and you can schedule the practical exam, it is an 8-hour exam plus an hour lunch, so it's 9 hours. It is, you can take it any Pearson VUE professional location. So it's a little different than the CCIE exam, where you have to go to RTP or San Jose. You can take it any Pearson VUE professional location. And there's about, I think, 300 in the US. It is a full day exam. If you pass it, then you're Cisco certified design expert, all right? Yay!
It's a practical exam.
I'm going to go into it. Yep, the practical. Yeah, I'm going to go into a little bit. So,
Well, the question is lunch provided or you have to provide it yourself?
what's that?
Is lunch provided?
No, it's not provided.
Oh.
Well, I can't say that. I guess in European countries it might be provided. I actually talked to Orna about that the other day. So I think it depends with your testing center. In the U.S., where I've taken it 4 times, it wasn't provided. You got to go and get lunch or bring it with you, and then eat it in the car.
Is the cost the same as the CCIE lab though?
Yeah.
You would think for that money they would at least give you lunch.
So it's like what,
there's
1200 bucks?
but it's actually I think it's actually more recently. And then they just
15 or
increased all the.
1600, right?
What's that?
15 or 1600.
Yeah, I think it was 1600. I don't know if it got. I think it got increased. I think all the written exams got increased. I don't know if the practical got increased.
Come on, you really shocked?
All right. So the written exam, like a CCIE written exam, it's focused on technology operation and how you apply technology in specific situations. Like I said, evolving technology questions were added in 2016. I think they're about 10% of the questions, and you get an instant result, pass or fail, right? On the screen, and you get the instant result. The practical lab, right? So it's no hardware, no CLI. It is a reading comprehension exam. You're going to read a lot, all right? So I definitely recommend like speed reading and finding key information as a way to practice before you take the exam. You're going to get documents and exhibits. There might be emails, documents, graphs, diagrams, and those are all kind of all kind of items to help you with the story of the scenario that you have. So they're going to form that story of a scenario. And you really need to connect with that story as a high level. You need to understand the story and kind of the flow of questions going through it. There's a lot of different question types. A lot of them are similar to the written exams. There is a branching type that I want to make sure I mention. So you have your multiple choice questions, but you have branching questions where you have the first question that might ask you which MPLS technology fits the requirements. This is a high level, right? So you might have MPLS L3 VPN, L2 VPN, VPLS, and maybe L2 TP v3. And you have to select one of those. You can't select more than one. You select one, your follow-on question is going to ask why. Right? And it's going to ask why per that one you chose. So it's kind of tied together. All right?
But that's not an open-ended though. It's
Nope.
not like why.
Eventually they
here's
will
why.
it's multiple choice, you know, so they're going to have multiple choice options. And eventually the test will level set you. Right? So it's not going to be 15 questions later you're still asking why for that same thing. Right? You know, there might be a few questions in the branch, you answer them, and then it's going to level set you with the document.
Actually, the branch zero goes deeper than one level.
One level? So you get one level of the branch.
All right, so if you answered the tree trunk wrong,
Yep.
you get like, what do you do now?
So,
Said like, well, actually, the
so it's-
customer didn't want that; he wanted that.
yeah, so it's going to
Right,
level
so-
set you, right? So you're
So
set
does that mean you basically failed?
No,
You failed
you might have gotten that
couple of
question wrong.
questions,
You might have not gotten a point, right?
Okay.
And I don't know the grading because I don't do anything with the CCD grading.
Kind of
portion, but
reset you though.
yeah, it's going to give you some documentation saying, hey, we went with L2 VPN for whatever reason, right?
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Or
If you go down the wrong branch,
Yeah.
it actually gives you a chance to redeem yourself. If you can justify why you chose that answer, you might get it done. Or whatever the partial scoring is.
But like I said, I say it when I talk to other people. Make sure you understand why you're choosing the answer, right? Don't just choose an answer because, oh, it looks good.
I like that one better.
Yeah. Make sure you understand why. Why are you choosing MPLS L3 VPN, right?
Cooler.
Yeah. It is an 8-hour, it's still an 8-hour exam, but it's like an 8-hour written exam,
Yeah.
all right?
Yeah.
And nowadays you do get an instant pass fail. I think a few years ago you had to wait 8 to 12 weeks, I believe, for your scores. Now you get an instant pass fail once you hit end exam. The other thing about this is the practical you can only test on certain days. So you can't just schedule it like the CCIE lab. You actually have to wait for the date to come around, schedule it for that date, and then you can go take it on that date only. This year, I think this is the first year they're doing 5. But they traditionally do 1 a quarter. I don't know if there's any more information here, but that's, yeah, see.
Date a quarter.
Yeah, one testing date a quarter. So that's why it took me 11 months. I failed it 3 times and passed it the last time I took it. I took it 4 times. So design CCD task domains and use cases. So this is really high level. Again, we're quite late on time, guys. Sorry. We add replace technology. So in a case where a new requirement comes in and they would need encryption now, maybe they have something they have to adhere to from a government standpoint now. Now they need encryption, right? So we have to add that encryption. This is a quick example. Merge, divest. So these are use cases for a business. We're going to merge 2 businesses together. What do we need to know from a design perspective, right? Subnet overlap. The applications in both places, how are they going to work, right? Divest. We're taking away part of the network. Are they both going to work? How are we going to design that, right? Scaling. So this would be a perfect example of, hey, something was implemented, but we just couldn't scale. Look at the diagram I had earlier, right? And again, it was a really simple diagram, but we couldn't scale with what we had. So now we need a scalable solution, right? So now you have to design a scalable solution based on requirements. Design failure. So someone designed something a certain way, but it doesn't meet the requirements. So now we have to come in and do maybe a short-term solution and then a long-term solution, right? And then greenfield, so brand new, right? And that's probably the easiest. The job tasks that you're graded on, right? So analyze design requirements, that's 36% of the grade. Develop network diagrams or designs, 39% of the grade. Implement network designs, 13%. And then validate and optimize network designs. Traditionally, and specifically in my experience, the first 2 are the hardest 2, especially if you're highly technical. Really analyzing the design requirements from the reading comprehension. And determining that, and then everything else kind of falls with that. So if you analyze things incorrectly, the other stuff kind of gets wrong because you're designing something that's totally different than what they want. That makes sense? And that's my personal opinion, so take that with a grain of salt.
You said if you're highly technical, meaning you end up overanalyzing?
Yep. Yeah, so me, I would overanalyze a lot of things. And I would spend like tons of time on questions because I would overanalyze the question constantly back and forth. And honestly, I wouldn't have a why. I'm choosing this answer. I'd be like, I'm choosing it because I'm just choosing it, right? I can't, maybe I didn't read the scenario appropriately. So, as you can see the percentages here, 36 and 39, those first two buckets are really the majority of the grade, right? So you got to, if you get the majority of those areas correct, you're doing pretty good. The technologies on the kind of exam, so we have layer 2, we have layer 3, network virtualization, and design consideration. So layer 2, we got spanning tree, right? What's that?
You still have spanning tree.
I mean, spanning tree is a portion of it, right? I mean, it's it's part of it.
You have frame relay.
I would say just know it. I mean, you can look at the blueprint, right? Then you got layer 3, so any routing protocol, BGP, OSPF, EIGRP, RIP, ISIS.
They have like overlay things too, though, right?
And they have overlays, so that's network virtualization. So you have like overlays like, you fabric path for layer 2, yeah. Fabric path trill. Network virtualization, so you have like DMVPN, VXLAN. And then design considerations, so QoS is kind of one of those. Multicast, things that maybe are services, and you need to design those for a solution, right? So a lot that goes into this kind of exam, right? A lot you have to know. I have a few questions here that I wrote for one of my scenarios that I did for my study group. This is not part of the CCD exam, okay? Because I wouldn't share them. And I don't write anything for the CCD exam, just to state that forward. So this is kind of a sample questions of what you might see. Again, nothing is beneficial here, but this is a regular multiple select option where you're given a question and you have multiple answers that you have to select, right? And you would get information from the scenario to answer this question, right? Same thing for this is another question type, which is chart. So again, you would have information in the scenario, and then here you'd have to pick out in this chart what's the things that make sense in the scenario, right? And I have a kind of a question for everyone here, and maybe you'll get a book, but what happens if you run ISIS on a DMVPN network?
I didn't know it was supported.
Yeah, in the state you have to.
It's not supported.
It's a PDUs. It's not IP.
It's not IP, right? And DMVPN's IP. So in this, if anyone put ISIS, any checkboxes in ISS, I would grade them. I'd get them wrong, right? Because it's not supported on DMVPN. So they do have to know those kind of things, right? And again, this is something I wrote. It's not on the exam, so don't think this is like the exam, okay? I wanted to show a chart, right? And how to deal with a chart, right?
Yeah, that's new. That's not something we're used to.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right? And then there's a catch here that I had, and I actually go into this in detail when I talk about the CCD exam. When I see a chart, I get the exam and I see a chart, and I'd be like, I need to fill the whole chart in. Like, I have this underlying urge, I need to fill the whole chart in. And I tell people, don't fall in that trap, right? If it is in your mind, right? It's your mind. It's not the exam, it's your mind. So tie every one of these boxes to the exam, to the scenario, right? And there would be requirements, and find them. Find the requirements, right? The last one here, and I'm not going to read it, but it's an ordering of tasks, right? So this is more of an implementation type of question, and you have to put them in the right order. This is usually subjective. There might be multiple answers and partial credit, right? I would give partial credit in this scenario for my group that I had in my study group. So those are those questions that I gave some examples, right? And then we have another one. A DMVPN is being deployed in an existing OSPF network. What protocol should you use? So we don't have any business requirements, right? Just technical understanding right now, right? So if I go through here, OSPF, because it's already in place, but this is a poor network for OSPF, right? So OSPF isn't, topology standpoint, hub and spoke isn't the best network for OSPF. BGP because it scales, right? But is it complex, right? So you can get with this that there's different things you have to think about and compare.
I know the right answer.
It could be
complex. It's not on there.
Rip's not on this. You could have RIP. RIP would be a possible solution if you do like passive RIP for a high scale DMVPN network, yeah. But to your point, the right answer here is it depends. Right? It depends on the requirements, right? So how to prepare for the CCDE? You're gonna read a lot. So get used to reading a lot, right? I highly recommend using Safari Online because you're gonna read a lot of books. And there's a lot of books on there that instead of buying them, you could get them on Safari Online. I had a year subscription. I think it was like $400, but it was a lot cheaper than buying all the books myself. You're gonna read a lot. You're gonna read RFCs, so get used to reading RFCs, right? The theory behind a protocol, white papers, and then you're gonna watch a lot of Cisco Live presentations, both physically at Cisco Live and on Cisco Live 365. And then blogs. There's a lot of blogs out there now. A lot of good information. Since the exam came out like 11 years ago, 10 years ago. A lot of information's out there, and it's good information now. Boot camps, if you are interested in doing this, these are the two boot camps I recommend. I'm kind of biased to the first one, since I wrote a book with Oron. But I'm trying to keep my biased nature aside. He has good content. And then Jeremy has good content as well. I attended Oron's boot camp, and then I have Jeremy's content, and it's probably, they're right next to each other. They're really good. All right, so there's other vendors and other things out there. I wouldn't recommend them. All right, if you're looking for more scenarios to test with, let me know. And there's a lot of scenarios out there now that are helpful. They're just not boot camp material. And then study groups. Get with like-minded people that are going for this certification together and discuss designs, right? But be open that you're going to be wrong, right? Leave your ego at the door and just discuss things, okay? So I already talked about Unleashing CCDE blog. That's the blog link. The written blueprint. These things change constantly probably, so make sure you keep up to date on it. You know, everything I said here, caveat is it might be changed, so look on these blueprints and make sure that you're studying the right things. Questions? Long-winded, I know, and I apologize. Any questions? Anyone want to go take the CCDE today?
Nah.
Are you
No?
being bad for everyone?
Maybe the written. Maybe they'll take the written.
So my personal opinion is it's probably the best exam there is, right? It changed.
The route switch was horrible last year.
The written? Yeah.
Yeah, the worst exam I've ever taken in my life, 4 times. I've never failed the CCIE written until last year, and I did it 4 times in a row.
So I passed 11 exams in a row with all the way up from all the way down from CCNA all the way up to 2 CCIEs, and I hadn't failed. And I took the CCDE written exam and I failed.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, it was the best written exam there is. Now it's changed since I took it, and I took it a second time and I passed it, right? And then I failed the CCDE 3 times in a row, right? But it's because my mind was wrong, right? My thought process was wrong. My assumptions and personality were wrong. So high level, right? So let's wrap up. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. So we talked about introduction. You learned about who I am. We thanked Wayfair, right, for having us here. Thank you, Wayfair, again. We talked about the history of design mindset at a high level. And then we went over an evolution of what I think is a design mindset with a framework that we can use everywhere. And then we discussed the CCDE and my views on the CCDE and how important I think it is. I think it's really important. So, so BOSNOG, right? We're all here because of BOSNOG. BOSNOG has a Twitter account. I don't know if everyone knows about it. Go follow us at BOSNOG, please. We will attempt really hard to use BOSNOG on Twitter more often than we have in the past. I'm taking a personal aspect into this and trying to be active on Twitter with the BOSNOG account. So follow us. You'll hear things from us. Any other meetups, so on and so forth. The next thing, Slack group. So we do have a Slack group, and this link wasn't working when AWS went down the other day. So we might have a business issue here. I don't know. But design problem. Yeah, design problem, right? But the Slack group, if it will auto join you to our Slack group, our community Slack channel, so you can talk to us all the time if you want. If you don't, then don't join. And then our website, obviously bosnog.org, right? And then me, if you really want to follow me, maybe you don't because you spent the last hour and a half, 2 hours talking to me. Twitter, I'm at Michael_Zsiga. All right. My LinkedIn's there. If you just search for Michael Zsiga, you'll probably find me. I think I'm the only one on LinkedIn. And then
recruiter's named Kelly.
I will. If you're from Wayfair.
Just kidding.
Oh, well.
Hard time.
You know you can customize your LinkedIn.
Yeah, I just didn't.
URL.
Yeah, I just didn't do it.
He likes that.
It has my name in it, man. Come on.
Yeah,
I'm good.
you're gonna probably should like Zig, you know. I don't
Yeah, I could do Zig or yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you really want to follow my blog or my website, it's zigbits.tech. All right. So I don't blog that often. I'm trying to blog more, but it's there. So if you want to follow it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.